a kid?
Glad to meet you. Where's the bathroom? I really gotta go.
Recently, I ventured to my local museum center to see an exhibition about Egypt that detailed what it was truly like to live during the reign of the pharaohs. It had all sorts of relics and artifacts that had been uncovered from this time period, some dating all the way back over 450,000 years ago, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about. Like, we're talking stuff so old even your high school history teacher likely wouldn't remember. Now, I've always been fascinated by this time period, but I've never actually tried to go back and pinpoint an exact moment where this interest began. Sure, learning about it in school certainly helped a lot, but I think I owe my thanks to someone else. Maybe a bumbling little mummy named Tutenstein, perhaps? Ah, Tutenstein. So many memories. Memomies. Memomies? Alright, I'll stop. I'll wrap it up with the puns for now. Get it? Wrap it. Tutenstein is an animated television series produced for Discovery Kids, and it was definitely one of my favorites to air on this channel, quickly becoming a staple for sleepy Saturday mornings. The show was created by Jay Stevens, who's probably most known for his work on The Secret Saturdazed, though I'd argue that this show is his true legacy. Apparently, the Tutenstein character originated from a comic book titled The Land of Nod, which I was totally unaware of as a child, but the series was so short-lived I don't feel too dumb for missing out on this factoid. Check this out, the little guy even had a crossover comic with Marvel. Where were you in Endgame, Tutenstein? Your pals needed you, but you just left them hanging. The show follows the titular Tutenstein, a deceased boy-pharaoh, based on the real-life Tutankhamun, who is awakened 3,000 years after his death by a girl named Cleo and her pet cat Luxor. Cleo's local museum has just installed an exhibit featuring a newly discovered sarcophagus and the mystical Staff of Waz. Cleo, who also happens to work at the museum for no compensation whatsoever, realizes that the curator fucked up and put the scepter in the wrong place. So being the only competent person who works at this museum, she returns the staff to its rightful spot, subsequently leading to the reanimation of the long-dead pharaoh Tutankhamun, with the help of an estranged bolt of lightning. Hey, now you know why he's called Tutenstein. Frankenstein parallels, am I right? And if you're still lost, then get with the program, you idiot. While all this mystical hoodoo is going down, Luxor also gains the ability to speak, and feels an uncanny urge to serve Tutenstein, claiming he's been chosen by the gods to protect the royal corpse.
Do not concern yourself with getting my chariot. I will walk. Like this.
Is this kid for real?
It's weird rewatching this show years later because there were only two major things that really stuck with me after all these years. The banging intro for sure, and then also how much I actually liked Tutenstein as a character. I thought he was funny then, and he's still as likable to me even as an adult. He's not horrified by his transformation in the slightest. In fact, he thinks it's quite cool, and he often uses his undead powers to get himself out of sticky situations, or for some funny gags. He's a child, and he definitely still acts like one, but he was also a pharaoh, so he has this air of superiority with him at all times, a pompous self-entitlement that drives him to continue his mission of ruling over his people just like he did all those years ago. I also find his raspy smoker voice very fitting, and I just love how expressive he is, especially when it comes to his facial animations. The animators did a really nice job of bringing him to life and making him enjoyable to watch. Props to them for even giving him a cleft lip, just like the real Tutankhamun had, which just furthers how much thought went into the little details of building this world and presenting the history as accurately as possible. For the most part, the show is a fish-out-of-water story, chronicling Tutenstein's escapades as he tries to make sense of this new, modern setting. As it's Cleo's fault for bringing him back to life, she and Luxor sort of become his protectors, if you will, guiding him through these new and unfamiliar situations while also trying to keep him hidden from the outside world and those of us who aren't really used to seeing a reanimated mummy walking around and fighting demonic hell creatures on the daily. As you can probably imagine, this leads to many zany hijinks and scenarios. But it's not all onks and river rides on the Nile. You see, when Tutenstein was reawakened, a portal to the Underworld was also opened, giving the show's big bad Set the perfect opportunity to cross over into our world and search for the Staff of Waz, with which he will finally be able to rule over both the Underworld and our world. Anyone who knows anything about Egyptian mythology will most likely know that this creepshow is the god of chaos, destruction, and disorder, who murdered his own brother Osiris. All in all, a pretty friendly guy. And apparently he's single too.
And not only that, ladies, he's a Pisces. Quiet!
What? Come on, ladies, you're telling me you wouldn't want to get with this?
Just a thought. Never mind.
And with Tutenstein and Set's arrival, the monsters and myths from Egypt's past begin to play out in our modern times, thus setting up the main conflicts of a majority of the episodes, each one focusing on teaching viewers about a certain aspect of Egyptian culture or following the story of a particular myth. Each episode perfectly balances being comedic and also providing enough historical context to be educational. As far as the main characters go, the dynamic between the trio is honestly pretty engaging, since all their personalities play off one another really well. Cleo and Lil Tut are often seen butting heads, because Tut can be an impatient little gremlin at times, often running headfirst into situations he's not entirely prepared for. I mean, he wants to boss people around and be treated like a king, but he's also a big baby who'd probably rather spend all day chilling in his pyramid playing Minecraft and eating Doritos than actually being a functioning member of the society he so desperately wants to rule.
Naturally, I am annoying and stubborn and spoiled. I am all that is!
In a majority of the show's most crucial moments, it's actually Cleo who forces Tutenstein to man up and actually act like a pharaoh should, as a hero to his people.
I don't get it. Everything that's been written about you said you were a warrior and a hero.
I had good press.
Ultimately, Cleo has Tut's back and the two actually become pretty good friends throughout the series. They're constantly teasing one another, and this banter between the two of them is actually one of the main highlights of the show to me. Supporting characters are also pretty likable, with most of them being familiar gods like Ra, Thoth, Osiris, Hathor. All their character designs look pretty cool too, but oh my god, what did they do to my dude Anubis?
Yes, Osiris. Ma'at. Bring forth the feather of truth.
And there's also Jacobs.
I know. I'll call security. Hey, wait a minute. I'm security.
He's basically Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, a man that clearly picked the wrong profession, considering he can't go 5 seconds without shitting a brick. Zoinks! This show just oozes style. From the darker color palette of browns, golds, and yellows, to the unique angular designs of the characters, this show has an art style all its own, one that's almost reminiscent of the ancient Egyptian art itself. There's accentuated eyes and sharp, simple line art. Part of why I think people like myself are so interested in ancient Egypt is because of how iconic its art, writing, and architecture was, with its larger-than-life lavishness and eccentricity. And in a way, this influence obviously shines through in this show's distinct style to help it stand out from its cartoon contemporaries. So yeah, the animation is pretty good for the most part as well, though every now and then there are a couple scenes that look a bit stiff. Just run into that paper background, guys, you're doing great. Or take this scene, for example. This camera dude kinda just slides right into the shot like he's a cutout being controlled by some invisible hand. The show also isn't afraid to touch on darker themes like death and the afterlife, both of which were a huge part of Egyptian culture. Episodes touch on subjects like the Book of the Dead, the process of mummification, and many of the monsters from the myths make appearances as well. You've got Amun, the Eater of Hearts, for example, and of course you can't forget about Set, who's, you know, not super easy on the eyes. So yeah, I was a little worried to go back and revisit this show, since I thought it might hold up about as well as a real mummy would. You know, being dry AF and hella stinky. Thankfully that's not the case though. This show is just as good as I remember it being, if not better, now that I'm older and all. Now I can appreciate some of the nuances in the writing and a few of the gags that probably went over my head as a small child. The humor in this show is top notch and I found myself laughing way more than I expected. It's so much more than just overused mummy puns, thank Osiris. If you've ever had any interest in Egyptian history or culture, I can't recommend this show enough. Tutenstein does such a great job of showcasing these myths and these characters in a humorous fashion, all the while teaching you about the history along the way. I can definitely see now why I fell in love with this time period in the first place, so I'll be forever thankful to this little guy.
Come on, we're having a great time!
I haven't really seen many people talking about this show, so if you did grow up watching Tutenstein or have fond memories of this troublesome little pharaoh, then please let me know in the comments below. Now I could go on and talking about this show for hours, but it's probably time for me to wrap up this episode of Saturdazed before I keep making horrible mummy jokes. So don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this, and as always, thanks for letting me be a part of your weekend. See you guys next time.